Hi, everybody. My name's Emma Claire Foley. I'm the campaign director for Diffuse Nuclear War, which is a campaign within RootsAction. And I'm really excited for our teach-in tonight. This is sort of the latest installment of the series of teach-ins we've been doing through the Teach-In Network, where we're bringing speakers together to talk about a topic that there are opportunities for action around now, and let you know what you can do. And tonight's topic is strategies for nuclear disarmament, a topic close to my heart. So I'm going to give a brief introduction and then introduce our first speaker, and we can go right ahead. Right now in 2025, there are many reasons to believe that the prospects for nuclear disarmament have grown vanishingly dim, and the possibility that nuclear weapons might be used again in the near future has felt very real in the recent past. The Iran deal is now a thing of the past, with the US and Israel opting for destructive and ineffective military action over diplomacy as a response to Iran's nuclear program. New START, the last remaining arms control treaty between the United States and Russia, is set to expire early next year, and it's not clear if anything will replace it to limit the arsenals of both of those countries. Open threats of nuclear use and decisions about how countries manage their nuclear weapons that increase the risk they will be used have become troublingly commonplace as part of global political discourse. And while the United States President Donald Trump has made several public statements that seem to criticize nuclear weapons and support diplomacy, the U.S. military budget continues to rise. Nuclear modernization programs continue locking in the country's arsenal for the coming decades, and it's not at all clear that these words signal any real shift towards a better status quo. But despite this, resistance to nuclear weapons persists, and it's a movement that is at least as old as the nuclear weapons themselves. During the Cold War, massive popular demonstrations and widespread public awareness helped push nuclear armed governments to take action to reduce the risk that nuclear weapons would be used again and reduce their arsenals. Today, there's a different but very vibrant movement that uses a range of approaches to reduce the dangers posed by nuclear weapons. So for this teach-in, we'll hear from experts and advocates with a range of approaches to the question of what is to be done today about nuclear weapons. We have 3 speakers tonight and a brief question and answer session at the end. So if you have a question, if you think of a question in the middle of a presentation, you can put it in the Q&A section of the Zoom. We'll try to get to as many as possible. But I'm going to go ahead and introduce our first panelist, who is Jessica Sleight, research and strategy consultant. Jessica is a research and strategy consultant with JMS Strategy. She spent over a decade in the nuclear weapons risk reduction and disarmament field, working to weave together policy, communications, and advocacy to shift understandings of security and build a more inclusive and equitable world. Previously, she served as the Janie Nolan Nuclear Security Fellow at the Truman Center for National Security, where she explored local perceptions of the role of nuclear weapons and perceptions of strength and security. Excuse me. She has also served as a partner for policy and strategy at Global Zero, an international movement for the multilateral, verifiable elimination of nuclear weapons, and was a member of the 2020 Center for Strategic and International Studies project on nuclear issues mid-career cadre. So Jessica, thank you so much for being here tonight, and whenever you're ready, take it away.
Thanks so much, Emma Claire, and thank you, RootsAction, for having me and amid kind of all the urgent issues that we're grappling with at home and around the world. I really appreciate people joining today. Emma Claire gave a really great overview of kind of the geopolitical landscape and the US kind of domestic policymaker landscape, but I really wanted to kind of just emphasize a few points. Over the past few years, progress on nuclear disarmament hasn't just stalled, it's unraveled. And so a lot of the work that we are going to be doing in order to kind of reinvigorate progress toward disarmament is really going to be predicated on us kind of undoing the unraveling, I guess, and really going back to kind of some of the basics things, but then pushing some of those fundamental things that we were doing in the past on arms control things forward. So we want to make sure that we're not just kind of going back to where we were, but we're pushing the ball forward and we're holding our leaders accountable to make progress, not just get back to where we were and get back to this kind of status of where we were. Um, and I really want to kind of zero in on Emma Claire mentioning and New START and the last remaining legal limits on nuclear weapons for the United States and Russia set to expire in February. And just to put that in context, this is for the first time in 40 years, we will have no legal restraints on current nuclear arsenals. And the number of nuclear weapons is actually expected to go up instead of down. And so there's this kind of prevailing kind of feeling that we've forgotten how dangerous it is to base our security on the threat of mass destruction. There's a naive and idealistic belief that nuclear deterrence will hold, or, if it doesn't hold, that if a nuclear weapon is used, we can handle the situation, we can control the situation. And we're forgetting that these are vulnerable and fallible human systems. And by we, I mean our leaders. And we have to remind them that the systems that we have built our security on are based on making other people insecure. And they're also based on human beings. And human beings are fallible. And things happen. And things can escalate quickly. And with one bad decision, one accident, one miscalculation, the course of our humanity can quickly change. So, on the congressional front, I also wanted to point out that there's kind of this general acceptance, and you see this kind of across parties, save for a few, champions that we have in Congress. But there's this kind of like consensus, so to speak, that the world that we're entering right now with China and Russia kind of building up, and the death of arms control, that the United States will need to increase its nuclear arsenal. And so when we're going into Congress and talking to folks, that's some of the information that we're getting back. Like, oh, there's just a general sense that, yeah, the United States might need more nuclear weapons. And so we're up against this really ingrained belief in US defense and decision-making circles that even if you don't like nuclear weapons, they are inevitable and there's nothing that we can really do, and we might actually need more. And so, what Emma Claire mentioned, there's can be a feeling of like, well, if that's the sense, what power do I have? And I think that for the general public, especially, that's one of the reasons that they tune out of this issue so often is, they know that nuclear weapons are bad, but when it comes down to it, they're terrified of the thought of nuclear use and the thought of nuclear war, but they don't feel like they can do anything about it. They don't feel like they have the power, they don't feel like they have the agency, and it's our job to show them where they have the power and show them where they have the agency. And I think we can borrow a lot from the like Gaza activists and protests where we're really engaging people on something that, for some folks don't necessarily impact them every day, but they're standing up and saying, no, this is not, you will not do this in my name. You will not be sending money to Israel to commit a genocide against the Gazan people, against the Palestinians. And I think that's a really good kind of model for us as we go to say that your voice, speaking out, matters. And if you speak out with others, it will create a tidal wave that will push our leaders and demand action, basically. So like Emma Claire said, we're kind of seeing this renewed sense of interest from culture leaders, from faith groups, from activists. There are a bunch of kind of documentaries coming out, of movies coming out. There's a House of Dynamite that Catherine Bigelow, directed, that is a really kind of visceral and riveting display of just how fragile our security is when it comes to nuclear weapons. And so these are going to be really vital for us to leverage when people are streaming these on Netflix. For some, it is a limited like theatrical release now, so some people might have it in their cities. But to engage people where they are, and where they are is going to be watching this on their TV screens and then saying, well, was terrifying. What can I do? And so I know that a number of organizations have had like discussion guides and outreach on that front, having watch parties and things like that, building a community around educating ourselves, but also being aware of the threat. And then from that awareness and that kind of, oh yeah, this threat is real. I forgot about it. What can we do? So I think first and foremost, we need to demand that leaders get back to the table to usher in the next era of cooperation to reduce the risk of nuclear use and make progress on disarmament. And so what this means in terms of, arms control and cooperation and dialogue, we know that New START expires in February 2026. There's currently an opening. Russia has offered the US a 1 year kind of handshake agreement to maintain these limits, and it's not perfect. And it's coming from Russia, so you kind of have to to parse what that means. But it's a chance to reestablish dialogue, and we should seize this opportunity, and not just to get to a handshake agreement that is going to be a political agreement that isn't going to have any legal implications. So not just to have that handshake agreement, but to then say, and we will establish formal negotiations to get us back on track on eliminating these weapons. And if Trump himself is already there, we don't need to kind of parse what Trump means and what he says and all of that kind of stuff. But if Trump is already sort of there and saying this, like we can leverage those comments as well to say, put your money where your mouth is and get back to the table. And then second, we need accountability. Um, if there is a handshake agreement, if there is no handshake agreement, the legal requirements and the legal restraints on nuclear arsenals, on US and Russian nuclear arsenals, are going to go away in February. And then this is where members of Congress really play a critical role in making sure we don't embark on a dangerous nuclear weapons buildup. They vote on treaties, they decide on budgets. As Emma Claire mentioned, we're just kind of shoveling money to nuclear weapons. We're going to spend $2 trillion overhauling our nuclear arsenal over the next 30 years. And that's $2 trillion at a time when people can't afford healthcare, housing, education, food. And our members need to hear from us that we are holding them accountable for what their priorities are. Are your priorities that I can have I can afford a roof over my head, and if I get sick, I'm not in peril of just, going into bankruptcy or debt? Or are you going to be making sure that you're giving subsidies to military contractors so they can, or contracts to military contractors to build more weapons that we don't need? And of course, these are weapons that are also in their own right over budget and behind schedule. And one of the programs, the new ICBM, this new missile that the administration is undertaking or the US is undertaking to build, is 81% over budget. And how is that a thing that isn't members of Congress aren't saying, get in here right now, get into this hearing room and tell us what is going on? I think that we need to be pushing our members of Congress to conduct more oversight, and to be asking the hard questions that we don't seem to be quite asking anymore. Um, so that's one of kind of the biggest things that we've heard when we go to Congress. Even when people, even with members who are like, you know what, we actually do want to engage in this issue, but our constituents are not talking about nuclear weapons. And I need to hear from them that this is an issue that they care about before I do anything, because I have other priorities that I need to take care of. And so, I mean, we've heard this for a few years. Members of Congress who even might want to do something are just not hearing from their constituents that it is a priority for them. And so encouraging people to call their members of Congress to say, I care about the nuclear issue. What are you doing to make sure that a nuclear weapon is never used? Um, that's really important for us to do so that it is on their radar. And I think that one of the best ways to do that, especially when we're talking about the budget and our priorities as a nation, that opens up pathways to build coalitional relationships with racial justice folks, climate folks, public education folks, public health folks, where you are saying, hey, when you're calling in about, climate change or education funding, I have a place where you can get that money, and it's the nuclear weapons budget. It's telling our members of Congress, invest in our future, not in our destruction. And if we can kind of hammer that over and over and over again, we can start to shift how we understand the value of nuclear weapons themselves. Um, so, what can we kind of do in this environment that we find ourselves in? It's demanding that our leaders get back to the table, and it is calling your members of Congress to say, this issue is important to me, and I'm going to be holding you accountable for your decisions around these, around nuclear weapons, and, I'll see you in 2026. And one last point that I want to make, and I kind of touched on it before, but I think we really need to not underestimate the value of simply kind of building community, because the way that we treat each other locally reflects the way we act globally. And so, if our domestic politics are rooted in fear and division and inequality, and in the belief that my security has to come at the expense of your security, how can we expect our international policy to be grounded in trust and cooperation? So, having those conversations about the root causes of, inequality and injustice, it will start to shift our own narrative of what we understand security to be and what we understand safety to be. And we can better connect nuclear weapons to all the other issues and all the other advocates and activists who are working to build a world where everyone feels safe.
Thank you so much. Very strong start to our call. We're going to go right to our second speaker. We have Seth Sheldon, General Counsel and United Nations Liaison for the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, or ICAN, which is the 2017 Nobel Peace Prize laureate, working to prohibit and eliminate nuclear weapons. Seth's work focuses on promoting the universalization and furthering the implementation of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, or the TPNW. He has a background as a lawyer and a law professor, and before that in music and arts. And he also serves on the board of directors for the Lawyers Committee on Nuclear Policy. So, Seth, thank you so much for being here tonight, and whenever you're ready.
Yeah, no, thank you, Emma Claire, and RootsAction for having me. It's really great to be speaking with you. And I just to first note that I'm on my phone outside of I'm just following a program after the UN meetings, and maybe that I have to get up and move. So I hope not while I'm speaking. It also means that I can't really access the chat as nimbly, so I may be missing a few things. But so far so good, and I really enjoyed, as always, like listening to well, Jessica right before me, and I very much agree with all of the points made, especially about risks and where we are in this moment and challenges. I think, as has been said, well, Emma Claire and Jessica spoke about this. Um, we're in a really tough spot. Things are bleak. It's difficult to know, as activists, how to even approach the challenges that we have. If you're conscious of this issue and you want to make a difference, it doesn't seem like there are that many avenues a lot of the time to get something that's really going to get us to the place that we want to well, I don't mean to speak for everyone. I mean, and in fact, I think that's the first question to frame is what we do want here. I think at ICANN, we're pretty clear that our vision is a world without nuclear weapons, that nuclear weapons don't make us safe, that deterrence, nuclear deterrence, which is the basis for the current US policy, um, doesn't work. It's it's not to say that there are not specific instances where a nuclear war did not start because someone else had nuclear weapons. When we say that, we mean that it's not a question of whether it can work ever. It's a question of whether it works forever. And these insane dangers that we expose ourselves to, and when those who know what they're talking about, who have really lived in this system, understand that the rational actor theory that undergirds the entire policy is nuts, and it cannot prevent nuclear war. I think Jessica spoke a bit about House of Dynamite, which I think exposes tells a story that hopefully will help the world see how frail the systems are, how unprepared we are for nuclear war, and that when you take into account the risk of accident, of miscalculation, the growing risks from the role of AI in artificial intelligence in nuclear command control communications, then we are careening for disaster. And so I think when we're framing the question, and something that's crucial for us to consider when we're thinking about where are we going to invest our hard-earned energy, our dollars, some people's, in some cases, our safety, is what do you think is necessary, and are you asking for that? And if you're advancing are you advancing what you know to be necessary, or are you settling for what you think to be possible? Because I think that's a struggle that we have in this moment, where we argue against ourselves sometimes, those of us in the community, to basically pick on, like, let's do something that we think we can get. And one other thing to reference that I think is quite interesting in this moment, I was also, as Jessica was speaking a bit about what we've heard from the Trump administration so far, and Donald Trump himself so far. I think that progressives, I put myself in this category for most issues. We have a framing that we can't expect progress in a Republican administration on an issue like this sometimes. And we can only sort of hold the dam until we get people back who are more reasonable. But I think, again, those of us who have worked in this space realize that historically, we have seen some of the biggest advancements in Republican administrations, and that we have to, I think, engage with what we get in a way that, on face value, and I don't know what that looks like exactly. I think, most of my work, and I'm going to go on a bit now about the TPNW and the work that I'm doing internationally. But, I think most of my work is in that sphere, working with other countries. But I think as a US citizen, as I am, when I think about engaging with the U.S. administration, I think, and I have, spoken to them too. It's a question. I try to hear what's been said. I mean, to say, oh, it's interesting to hear that in your last administration you almost negotiated a trilateral agreement with Russia and China. So where's that now? What's stopping you? Where? Just take it seriously. I think we've seen. All of us who work on this issue are working on one of the great existential dangers of our time. It seems almost unsolvable a lot of the time, but it is, of course, the most solvable of all existential dangers. This is a choice that takes political will and technical know-how, but it's ultimately it is doable. And we've seen states disarm before. We've seen the U.S. and Russia disarm, before. So we know it can be done. And to talk a little bit about the solution that we're working on, I don't know how many in the audience would know, so I'll just say a little bit about the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. This is the 2017 treaty. It's Emma Claire mentioned, that we won the Nobel Peace Prize. It was largely for advancing this treaty and for our work to draw attention to the humanitarian consequences of any use of nuclear weapons. And if you're in the U.S., even if you're working on this issue, it would be fair if it's not something you're thinking about every day, because I think a lot of people are don't see it as a solution. But meanwhile, we have most people in most of the world, I would say, who are working on this issue are advancing it. So just to tell you quickly a bit about it, it was adopted in 2017, and it establishes the first ever comprehensive global treaty-based ban on nuclear weapons, as well as a legal framework for eliminating nuclear weapons programs. And it also has the first ever legal framework for assisting victims and remediating environments that have been affected by the use and testing of nuclear weapons. And it was adopted after 7 decades of people working to get to some kind of an agreement like this, um, basically by going around the possessor states and bringing the rest of the world to the table and working through the UN General Assembly instead of the Conference on Disarmament, and brought about by states that have shared the vision that most of us in civil society have, that nuclear weapons pose unacceptable humanitarian consequences, the likes of which cannot be addressed. That it was adopted to fill a gap in international law, and it was adopted to build pressure by those states that support it against the minority of states that don't support it. And here we remember that there's only not only but they pose an existential risk to all of humanity. But it's 9 states that possess nuclear weapons out of 197 states in the world. And so this is a young treaty. It entered into force only in 2021, after rapidly getting the first 50 countries to join it, which was the requisite number for it to become law. Today, as of in fact just a couple weeks ago, we reached our 74th state party, and we have an additional 25 countries that have signed it yet to ratify it. So it means that we just passed this milestone of having 99 states, which is a global majority of countries in the world, that have either become states parties or signatories. And so now we just got to get the other half. I know that those of us, again, working in the US sometimes we say like, well, the U.S. obviously isn't going to join it right away. So what can we work on? And I appreciate that. I think though that wherever we are, I think we have to be guided by this as the vision. There's not going to be another global ban treaty. This is the one. I mean, obviously, if there's a trilateral disarmament treaty someday between the countries with the most nuclear weapons, they disarm, they would still join the TPNW. This is certainly the way it's structured. And we would remember that, the NPT, which we now talk about as the cornerstone of the nuclear weapons architecture, it took decades for France to join it, for China to join it when they now champion it. It took decades for Argentina to join the Treaty of Tlatelolco, which is of course many will know the landmark agreement that made Latin America and the Caribbean a nuclear weapons free zone, and provided the model for building other nuclear weapons free zones, which then provided the model for building the TPNW, the treaty that we work on. So our vision is that the U.S. will join. The real question is whether we do so before or after there's a great catastrophe. I mean, that's really the way I think about it anyway. It's a matter of convincing everyone that disarmament is in their interests before it becomes all too clear that it is. And we're working on building this treaty. and working with the countries that support it to build a growing membership. And there's threads of work that are being actionized under this treaty that are part of universalizing it, part of getting the rest of the world to agree with it. Um, one perhaps element of it, and I don't want to go on too long, but that worth noting is under the TPNW is that there's a thread of work on the security concerns of TPNW states parties that I think is quite interesting because it's the first of its kind sort of system for bringing together the majority of the world states to respond to nuclear armed states that say, yeah, we all believe in a world without nuclear weapons, but it's not within our security interests in this moment to take it forward. It doesn't, given the security environment of the world today. But now we have a thread of work happening from the rest of the world saying, yeah, okay, but what about our security interests? These are all the ways in which us as non-possessor states are threatened by the policies and the weapons that you have. Um, so let me just quickly, maybe I'll just say a few things about what you can do if you're convinced that this is something you want to work more on. Um, I think, well, first you should check us out if you don't know us. Our website's icanw.org or nuclearban.org. On all the socials, we're hashtag nuclear ban. We are a campaign of partner organizations, really. We're more than 700 today in 111 countries, including, I think, around 70 or so in the US. And we work differently in different countries depending on that country's perspective on abolishing nuclear weapons. And one thing that we always try to do is center the voices of the true experts of what nuclear weapons are and do. So, meaning the survivors from Hiroshima and Nagasaki, survivors of the more than 2,000 tests, so-called tests of nuclear weapons, other detonations that have happened around the world, because and center the scientists who know what nuclear weapons, how they work, the doctors that know that what would happen to a human body if nuclear weapons are detonated in their city. Because I think this is we found to be one of the most effective ways to change the conversation from one that is focused only on the security of states to the security of humans, and for that matter, all life. And it's helped us get to the treaty in the first place to reframe the discussion that way, and it's helping us get other states to join as well. And so you can join one of these partner organizations and support them as well. And they're all listed on our website. We have initiatives like this ICANN Cities Appeal, which is a program by which cities that are in nuclear armed states or states that claim protection from nuclear weapons take either through their city council or whatever other procedure. Our country doesn't support the ban treaty, but we do, we hereby declare. And we've had in the U.S. we've had around the world we've had hundreds of cities join in the U.S. Many cities, including Washington, New York, Los Angeles. But perhaps not your city. So that's one thing you could work on. In similar fashion, we have a parliamentary pledge or a congressional pledge. About a dozen Congress people, I think, have signed on to this so far, but maybe not your congressperson. And it's a similar idea where they say, even though our federal government doesn't support the treaty, we do, and our constituents do. And this past summer, some of those people who signed the pledge in the U.S. took the House of Representatives floor to speak about the TPNW. And then we have many other initiatives, for example, numerous divestment campaigns. We publish I would say the leading reports on nuclear weapons spending every year, as well as the Don't Bank on the Bomb report, which basically points people to those companies and banks that invest in just a couple of dozen companies that manufacture and maintain nuclear weapons. and then join us and engage with the work. The next meeting of the TPNW will be the first review conference of the TPNW. So we've had 3 meetings of states parties. The next meeting is the first review conference. That's next November 2026, the 30th November to December 4th of 2026 in New York City. There's actually going to be a campaign call next week for ICANNers. So if you're on our list, then you can join that. But if not, you can join ICANN and then join the call. We'll be discussing where things stand and some of our next steps in preparation for the review conference. So maybe I'll stop there because I probably filled my time and wait to discuss later.
Thanks so much, Seth. Rolling right along to try to make sure we get this as close to possible to being on time. We've got a lot of great information, and I want to make sure we get at least one question in. I'm going to introduce Norman Solomon, National Director of RootsAction and Executive Director of Accuracy.org. Norman has been an activist and writer against nuclear weapons since the 1970s. His latest book is War Made Invisible: How America Hides the Human Toll of Its Military Machine. His dozen other books include War Made Easy: How Presidents and Pundits Keep Spinning Us to Death, Target Iraq, What the News Media Didn't Tell You, co-authored with foreign correspondent Reese Ehrlich, and The Habits of Highly Deceptive Media. Solomon is the founder of the Institute for Public Accuracy, where he is executive director. He is co-founder and national director of the online organization RootsAction.org, which now has 1.2 million online supporters, and he's appeared as a guest at many media outlets, including PBS NewsHour, CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, Democracy Now!, C-SPAN's Washington Journal Marketplace, and NPR's All Things Considered. So, Norman, the floor is yours.
Well, thanks to everybody who has gathered here with us this evening. When I hear about the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, I think about what a profound message it is from governments around the world, most importantly from people around the world, truly billions of people who recognize the folly, really the insanity of the nuclear arms race. And I think in the UN context and in the global context, the treaty is very important. And the outcry, the methodical groundwork, and the legalistic language, and the human appeal behind the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons is very important. In the US context, I think we have a challenge that when people talk about abolition of nuclear weapons, it comes across to many people as a platitude. It comes across as wishing for something that is demonstrably impractical and just ain't going to happen. And at a practical level, given that bandwidth is finite, attention is finite, the staff time of groups, the media space, if it can be wrangled, is finite, emphasis is finite, there is the question of what does the emphasis on abolition of nuclear weapons mean? What does it mean when we are faced with the possibility that New START will not be renewed? What does it mean that in this century, key treaties have been killed? INF, Open Skies, ABM. The Iran nuclear deal was killed by a Republican president and then not resuscitated by President Biden. And we also have the threat of ICBMs, which many experts, including William Perry, the former defense secretary, pretty much has identified as the most dangerous types of weapons, the land-based nuclear weapons. And we can ask ourselves, I think we need to, when we need to be emphasizing the need to reinstate an INF treaty, why are we talking about abolition of nuclear weapons? When we need to be talking about reinstating the Open Skies Treaty, why are we talking about abolition of nuclear weapons? When we need to reinstate the ABM Treaty, likewise, it's the same question. When the tensions with Iran have clearly become so serious, so dangerous, and the possibility of reinstating the JCPOA is there but has not been actualized. Why are we not talking more about the Iran nuclear deal? And I think this is a reality. It's a political reality, it's a media reality, it is a reality of organizations which are working so hard to roll back the madness of nuclear weapons. As Ron Dellum said, nuclear weapons are an equal opportunity destroyer. And one of the realities, I'm afraid, is that if people believe that a weapons system will make them safer, they're willing to accept massive expenditures. And I think we've seen that. It doesn't justify the mentality, it doesn't justify the way that these cost overruns become part of the nuclear weapons contracting picture. But it is a challenge for us when, for instance, we go to Capitol Hill and we say, oh, the Sentinel program, it's so way over budget. So therefore it should be stopped. I'm not sure that's the most effective message. It's a message. I think it's a useful message. But when you read Dan Ellsberg's book, The Doomsday Machine, when you read material and articles come out from, for instance, General Cartwright and others, experts in the field who identify ICBMs as peculiarly dangerous, with all nuclear weapons, of course, being abhorrent, then emphasizing the cost seems to be a avoidance of the deeper issue, which is that all ICBMs should be shut down. And when the financial argument gets made, then as we've seen in the last few years, and Adam Smith, when he was chair of the House Armed Systems Committee, was a case in point, it can be end-runded. When we make a financial argument, people can say, oh, well, just refurbishing the Minuteman 3 or whatever is more cost effective, or vice versa, or the ball gets moved around and we're told that one is more expensive or less, one is more or less expensive as a weapon system. The fundamentals are that ICBMs should be shut down. And it was really disturbing to me in the last years when there was a move to transfer some money away from the Sentinel program, maybe $1 billion for COVID relief or whatever. The argument was good there, but it didn't go beyond that. It said, let's save the money, it's too expensive, but what about the underlying reality, which should be a massive campaign, which is let's first shut down the land-based part of the triad. Certainly the expenses, the insane cost of nuclear weapons needs to be challenged, needs to be denounced. Martin Luther King described out of control military spending as, and this is his words, demonic, destructive suction tube. It was true in 1967, and it's true now. Nuclear weapons spending, as deranged as it is a subset of our overall militarism. And that, I think, is as well a challenge for us, that nuclear weapons don't exist simply out on their own. They're part of an entire military-industrial complex, of course, now a military-industrial media, communications, intelligence complex, extremely lucrative. One of the horrors that we've faced along with the terrible Ukraine war, of course, has been the threats pretty thinly veiled from Vladimir Putin to perhaps use so-called tactical nuclear weapons and so forth. And the response sometimes that I heard was, well, this underscores the need to abolish nuclear weapons. Well, it certainly is a reminder of the need to reestablish an arms control regimen. It is a reminder ultimately that we should seek to abolish nuclear weapons. And at the same time, in the short term, in the medium term, the increasing crisis, increasing danger that the Ukraine war, essentially, one might argue, among other things, a proxy war between the two biggest nuclear superpowers, that underneath that is the need for what used to be called détente. In the last many years, many arms control and disarmament groups based in DC have pretty much backed away from calling for détente because they didn't want to get baited as Putin tools. I think that's a very dangerous backing away. And perhaps now more because Biden is out of office, there's a willingness to uh, demand more serious negotiations between these two nuclear superpowers. I think Seth's point is very important about Republican administrations. And I had a little flashback when I was much, much younger, being in Moscow, 1987, and George Shultz, who was no great guy, and many reasons that we condemned him at the time, but the willingness of the Reagan administration to go ahead and do serious negotiations with what was then the Soviet Union. We ended up with the INF Treaty, which, as I mentioned, has since been destroyed and very little outcry to restore it. And one would think, given what's going on in Europe and Ukraine and so forth, the INF would be pretty high up on our agenda to demand that it be reinstated. We do have this opportunity now with all of the terrible realities of the Trump administration. 4 years before this January were nothing to write home about. The Biden administration was horrific on nuclear weapons. And I can remember a conversation with a leader of one of the main arms control groups in Washington in 2021. And when Biden was saying, as I recall, that, or reiterating that Vladimir Putin had no soul, at RootsAction, we worked with other groups and we put out a statement condemning that kind of approach by Biden. And I was told by this leader, well, our group can't sign on to this statement. Somebody on our board of directors is already nominated for the Biden administration in the State Department. Another one of them might be nominated, so we're not going to sign on. And I think this kind of enabling of democratic administrations has not served us well. And we have a challenge to not only recognize, which we do, that the nuclear weapons insanity is bipartisan, but also to behave as such. And I guess I just close with an observation that there are many, not enough, but there are, you could count on a couple of hands, some members of Congress who are Democrats who are saying some really great things on nuclear weapons. I think that since there are probably 1,000 congressional offices around the country and district offices and so forth, we have an opportunity to hold their feet to the fire and say, okay, great, you're endorsing a call for abolition of nuclear weapons. Why aren't you calling for reinstatement of INF, Open Skies, ABM? Why aren't you demanding more vocally the reinstatement of the Iran nuclear deal? We have this circumstance. Obviously, we don't want to be in this situation, but we are. And as we talk this out, reason this out, come out with better strategies, there will be, I think, more hope, more genuine hope for the kind of changes we want.
Thanks so much, Norman. And thanks to all the speakers for your contributions so far. And we're going to do a quick Q&A using some of the questions we've gathered in the course of the presentations, then give you, the audience, some opportunities for action to reach out to the speakers as well with additional, questions or asks for guidance on action if you'd like. But onto the Q&A, kind of a theme I'm seeing in the questions and comments submitted. I mean, I think our speakers all, work on different scales of international as well as, national United States and global and local politics. And one question I'd like to pose to everyone or anyone who'd like to pick it up is what can people do at the level of local politics to shift this issue, whether they live in a place where there's a substantial, maybe, manufacturing or other like political strategic concern relating to the nuclear weapons infrastructure of the United States, or not. How does this issue manifest in local politics in the United States in your experience?
Yeah, I can take a first crack at that. My dog is having a thing, so sorry if you know. But locally, I last year spent some time in a few places across the United States talking about nuclear risk and how people perceive nuclear risk and nuclear weapons in general. And I was kind of usually the only one asking people about nuclear weapons, and most of them were like, "Why are you asking me about this?" But they were open, and I think that there is an opportunity both for education but also for outreach. And the way that I kind of deviate between the two is like education is kind of going and telling people about nuclear weapons and telling people about the nuclear threat, and outreach is a little bit more about like, let's have a conversation about what is really important to you. And within that, we can kind of talk about nuclear weapons, and how that relates to kind of the things that are important to you. And people really kind of responded to that in a really great way and like understood how the conversations that they have locally spin up and are amplified on the international scale, and how it's really important that we are building our local communities in a way that we want to be represented at the state and the national and international level. At a more maybe tangible thing that folks can do locally, I know that Seth mentioned the ICANN Cities Appeal, and then there's also the Back from the Brink that somebody just mentioned in the chat, I believe. There are city resolutions that folks can bring to their city councils. And I also was talking with city council members who have the most energy on the planet and are really kind of tuned into these issues as well when they're presented with them. So those are really great organizing tools to build awareness in your community about the threat, build awareness about the solutions, and then making sure that that gets from the city up to the federal level. And I think that's really, really important because, like it or not, the members of Congress are the ones that hold the purse strings and things like that. So they do need to hear. And I want to reiterate, we hear from members of Congress that they need to hear from their constituents. So please, please do tell your member of Congress that you care about these issues. And I put my email in the chat if anyone wants some more information about reaching out to your member of Congress. What you can do kind of locally in your community to have these conversations and build community around these issues. I'm happy to give some of that or give that information to folks.
I can weigh in. I mean, I already gave my answer, I think, to this question when I said that, check out some of the actions. We talk a lot about them on our website, but getting your representative to sign the ICANN pledge, or your local or federal representatives can join, getting your city council to endorse the TPNW through the ICANN Cities Appeal, or customize it back from the brink resolution in similar regard. Or if your city already has joined, then ask and investigate whether the city invests its money in nuclear weapons. Or we've had a number of divestment campaigns on the city level. New York City, we have a resolution that calls on our city controller to divest what we think is around $500 million of public pension fund money out of companies that manufacture and maintain nuclear weapons. This, of course, is a huge part of what I think everyone who's working on this thinks about. Is not just about making nuclear weapons illegal. It's also about making them irrelevant if you believe that it's ultimately a problem of the nuclear industrial machine, then it's really a capitalist problem, and taking the money out is a big part of it. Public actions, we support days of action. We coordinate materials, toolkits to do the actions. All the time, and they always look different. I mean, this year, of course, a lot of our actions were about the 80th anniversary of the invention of nuclear weapons and their first use. I was working with Ben Cohen of Ben and Jerry's ice cream this summer in Los Alamos, New Mexico, and in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Really, the belly of the beast of the nuclear weapons industry, to where we put up these massive cubes in the middle of the road, showing people how much money is being spent on nuclear weapons in the U.S., and to really confront people about the problem. If I mean, Norman talked about confronting it from a money issue angle. And that's just one angle, of course, but that was the way he has fashioned the campaign. But also raising awareness about the TPNW. That's what I do everywhere I go, and I think it's really meaningful to, even if it's across the dinner table or in an op-ed, or wherever you are, to help people understand that we're living in a bubble, really, in this world of people who think nuclear weapons keep us safe, and if we can disavow people of that notion, we're going to win. And that's what most of the world thinks, that they don't keep us safe. If we can't lead as the US, we should follow.
Yeah, something I'd add in terms of local politics is that there are so many relationships between local elected officials, state legislature officials, and members of Congress. And so it really is an opportunity that when we get, as so many people have done, we know Jackie Cabasso and other wonderful activists have been for years working with mayors around the country, that when they are willing and able, and they often do, pass resolutions, that they then take those resolutions to members of the House and members of the Senate in Washington, D.C., and say, this is our grassroots perspective, and this is what we want from you. Are you delivering or not? So it doesn't just sit on the shelf, but becomes a tool to pressure people who are voting the appropriations.
Great. So we've got some great analyses here and some great opportunities for action. And I want to just say that we'll be sending out, we'll have a recording of this teach-in available after the fact. We'll send out an email with some opportunities for action, kind of collected what we've mentioned here. Ryan has also posted a link to an action we have urging representatives to eliminate ICBMs on the RootsAction website if you'd like to take part in that. And I'm going to hand the floor over to Ryan briefly just now to tell you all about another great way you can get involved, which would be to organize your very own teach-in just like this in your communities or online, to talk about some of these issues and spread the word. Ryan?
Yeah, I just posted a link in the chat to our how-to page on how to organize your own teach-in with the Teach-In Network. We provide speakers. We will contact people for you. We will find all the experts you need to host your own teach-in. All you have to do is have an audience available to you. If you work with anybody, if you organize with anybody at the local level, I encourage you to talk to them about hosting a teach-in, try to bring in more people, help grow your organization. We will help you. It's totally free, of course. So please check that out. I'm also going to post a couple more things. We have 2 more teach-ins coming up on Iran and on Gaza. Here, this one on Iran is October 30th. And then we have another one on Palestine and U.S. accountability for the genocide in Gaza on November 13th. So I urge you all to RSVP for those. We're going to have a bunch of experts on those calls as well. Thank you, Jessica, Seth, and Norman. You guys were excellent tonight. We have more experts And we will just continue organizing these calls. And I urge you to organize your own and let us help you do it. So thank you. And thank you, Emma Claire.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks again to Jessica, Norman, and Seth, and thank you to all of you who stayed on for 4 extra minutes for this call. Like I said, we'll be sending out a kind of wrap-up email about this and giving you all lots and lots of ways to get involved and stay involved. So I think we'll be signing off now, but have a great night and looking forward to keep working with all of you.